Welcome to Recharging Industry, a request for information workshop on domestic manufacturing conversion grants for electrified vehicles. Please note that this event is being recorded and may be made available for viewing in the next few weeks. Before we start, I'd like to explain how this event will be managed. As a participant, your video and audio were automatically turned off when you joined. If you have difficulties related to technology, for example, if you cannot hear a speaker or see the presentation slides, we recommend you exit the event and re-enter. The public chat and Q&A have been disabled. You will have an opportunity to share feedback via live polling offered throughout the session. At this time, you can go ahead and join us in Menti using the link or the QR code provided here. We will populate questions there throughout the program and notify you when it's time to switch over. Closed captions are available for this event. If you would like to view the captions, please enable them using the closed captions icon at the bottom left of your WebEx screen. Please advance the slide. This program has been condensed to return you to your day a little sooner than originally planned, and the Thursday and Friday agendas have been coordinated so that you did not have to attend both sessions. Let me quickly walk you through our agenda. At the start of today's workshop, we will hear an introduction and overview of the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, or MESC. Next, we will discuss the anticipated scope and details of the currently active request for information on domestic manufacturing conversion grants for electrified vehicles. Then we will discuss how proposed programs could benefit both impacted communities and workers. Lastly, we will discuss equity, environmental, and energy justice priorities. Please advance the slide. Today's workshop will be moderated by Dr. Jacob Ward. Jake serves as Supply Chain Deployment Manager in the new Energy Sector Industrial Base Program within MESC, where he leads the federal government's efforts in modeling, mapping, and analyzing America's critical energy supply chains. Jake will be hosting our polling sessions scattered throughout the workshop. I'll hand it over to you, Jake.
Thank you so much, Jen, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Our first speaker will be David Howell. Dave is the Acting Director and Principal Deputy Director of the Department of Energy's Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains. Dave previously worked in the Vehicle Technologies Office, where he guided battery research and development efforts for the last 20 years. He will provide an introduction and overview of the newly formed MESC office. Take it away, Dave.
Are really important to the Department of Energy and to the manufacturing and energy supply chain specifically as we built out our plans and strategy to execute significant funds related to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. As Jen mentioned, I'm Dave Howell. I'm the Principal Deputy Director of the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains. We refer to as MESC here at the Department of Energy. I'll provide a few minutes of background on MESC and how we are situated in the Department of Energy's landscape of research, development, and demonstration and deployment. Next slide, please. So, as an organizational chart, you see here, right in the middle is the Undersecretary for Infrastructure, the S3 office, we refer to it as. This is a brand new Undersecretary's office, stood up just a little over 15 months ago in response to significant funding that has the Department of Energy has inherited through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, totaling almost $100 billion between the two provisions. The Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains Office is circled there under the S3 office. And I will go into details on how we differentiate ourselves between our normal science and innovation offices that you may be familiar with. Next slide, please. So a little background on MESC and where we really fit. It really spurs from the America Supply Chains reports, those deep dive assessment reports that the president requested each agency conduct on energy, and in our case, on energy supply industrial base. As you see, we have 14 reports here that we published back in February 2021. We are currently updating the progress being made on all of the discussion and the issues that were outlined in these reports and that laid out dozens of critical strategies and actions that we as a department, as a federal agency, as a federal government needed to employ in order to build out a secure, resilient, and diverse domestic energy industrial base. There's also an additional report we did a year earlier on high capacity batteries that we're also implementing under the Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains Office. Next slide, please. So just one of the key things that we've been doing over the past 18 to 24 months as a department is doing deep dive analysis on supply chains, on the global supply chains that are relevant to the energy sector industrial base. You see part of the modeling, mapping, and mapping and analysis activity and results here. This is for lithium minerals and lithium flow for lithium ion batteries. As you see, we start with where the mineral resources are, where it's being extracted today, and how that flows to the refining, to the component level processing and production, all the way through battery manufacturing, EV manufacturing, and end use. So we're well on our way to do this for all of the critical mineral elements laid out by the Department of Energy, and specifically those that are relevant to what we're trying to do with the bipartisan infrastructure law provisions and the IRA provisions. So keep an eye out. We'll be publishing these in the future for each of our areas. Next slide, please. So here's where the Office of Manufacturing Energy Supply Chain really lies within the innovation, demonstration, and manufacturing landscape. Those activities on the left, many people know the Department of Energy have cut our teeth on basic research, basic science, and applied research and development, whether that's through our Basic Energy Sciences Office or our applied research programs like EERE and the Vehicle Technologies Office, Office of Electricity, Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, our Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Technology Office, and ARPA-E. The new Undersecretary for Infrastructure establishes or collates key offices within the Department of Energy really focused on large-scale demonstration and manufacturing. And you see where the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, the Loan Program Office, and MESC actually fit in that landscape. Specifically, OSED funds large-scale demonstrations on key areas of the energy sector, industrial base, on key innovation areas that could possibly significantly help to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, reduce cost, and stand up clean energy manufacturing across the nation. The Loan Program Office, billions of dollars for debt financing for loans to establish a manufacturing capacity across the energy sector industrial base. And the MESC, Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains Office, is financial assistance grants to do the same, similar to the Loan Program Office, to stand up manufacturing capacity in key areas of the energy sector industrial base. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about the specific mission of MESC and our distinctives. Scale up and deployment of manufacturing infrastructure is our focus, and that can come in several different flavors. Scale up and deployment of new manufacturing capabilities across the energy sector industrial base, supporting facility upgrades of existing manufacturing facilities in order to reduce the energy burden of those facilities, reduce carbon emissions, and increase efficiency and productivity of those current facilities, bolstering small and medium-sized manufacturing enterprises across across the nation, and specifically those areas that have been impacted by this energy transition. And of course, standing up activities to bolster the energy sector, manufacturing capabilities and resources and workforce. Next slide. So within MESC, there are three major sub-programs or program offices, one deemed facility and workforce. And even though we're a brand new office, you see we actually have inherited significant responsibility, significant funds to execute, whether it's a BIL funds or whether it's IRA funds. So in the facility and workforce area, just a little over $1.3 billion to execute to upgrade existing manufacturing facilities, really addressing regional manufacturing challenges and emphasis on small and medium-sized enterprises specifically and training the next generation workforce. The second office, the Battery and Critical Materials Office, is executing the $6.215 billion related to battery manufacturing, from separation and refining of extracted battery materials to developing precursor materials to battery components like cathodes, anodes, and electrolytes, cell manufacturing, and recycling. We also have activities to stand up capabilities in rare earth element production as well. And you see here that's a significant portion of the BIL funds. And then the third area is the Energy Sector Industrial Base Office, and that's to scale up and deploy new manufacturing capacities specifically focused on critical components and devices and systems across the energy sector industrial base. So you can think of the battery and critical materials area as mostly materials processing activities, whereas the energy sector industrial base is taking those materials and capabilities and supporting critical components and devices and systems. One of the things that we also want to stand up within the energy sector industrial base activity is a world-class mapping, modeling, and analysis capability and tools. Next slide, please. So regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, as you probably know, there's quite a bit of provisions that support domestic material sourcing and battery production, including credits for clean vehicles with domestic content, and other provisions that can help increase the number of vehicles that qualify for these provisions. So tax credits are a big part of that. We're working, with our colleagues at the IRS to develop and establish those advanced manufacturing production tax credit programs, the advanced energy project credit program as well, as you see here. There's also support for direct purchasing of vehicles, $3 billion to the U.S. Postal Service to purchase zero-emission electric vehicles and install charging infrastructure. And of course, our Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing, the loan program, also was provided $3 billion as credit subsidies as well. What we're actually specifically focused on today is that top bullet, which is the $2 billion in domestic manufacturing conversion grants. And these conversion grants are specifically to support the transition of domestic manufacturing facilities that are installed today to manufacture EV, hybrid, or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles or components. And so that's going to be our focus of this workshop. And at this point, next slide, please. I am going to turn this over to my colleague, Stephen Boyd, who is going to do a deep dive into the Domestic Manufacturing Conversion Grant Program. Stephen leads the Battery and Critical Materials Office in MESC. He's a long-standing Department of Energy member and colleague, served in the Vehicle Technologies Office, in the electrification team, battery and electrification team, and which would include electric drive systems and battery systems as well, and charging infrastructure systems as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks so much. And hi, everyone. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll jump right in. So I would just like to start with a few questions to poll for the audience.
All right, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Stephen. I'm going to jump back in and interrupt Stephen. We'll get back to him in just a second. We do have an interactive portion that we'll transition to where we will feature the polling functionality that Jen foreshadowed in her opening remarks. So we have a few icebreaker polls that we've pulled together to help us get to know who is on the line today and your familiarity with the Department of Energy, working with DOE, and the various technologies that are potentially in scope for the IRA provision we're discussing today. So I see several folks are already responding to the Mentee poll, which is fantastic. We have quite a few more of you online. So please go ahead and grab your smartphone, scan that QR code in the lower left-hand side of the screen. You don't have to have the Mentee app installed, so everyone is able to participate as long as you have a smartphone and can scan that QR code, or even going to mentee.com on your non-smart device and entering the code that you see there. So this first question asks you to consider which DOE programs potentially related to the domestic manufacturing grants that we're talking about today that are within the Department of Energy. So asking about previous experience with MESC, with our Loan Programs Office, with the Vehicle Technologies Office, with our Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office, with the Office of Technology Transitions, with our Advanced Manufacturing and Material Technologies Office, or other parts of DOE. I'll note some of you may have worked with AMTO in its previous iteration. It was the Advanced Manufacturing Office. So if you're familiar with the office by that name, please let us know too. So it looks like a good distribution with a concentration, especially in the Vehicle Technologies Office. So good representation of folks who participated with that part of DOE previously. Looks like a good part of you haven't worked with DOE before. So fantastic to have new faces, new perspectives on the line today too. And then looks like several of you have worked with the Loan Programs Office and the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office. Great. Great to see good representation across technologies and across parts of DOE here for those of you who have worked with this before. Welcome again to all of you. So I think with that, we can jump to the next slide. Here we have our second question, helping us understand your familiarity with the technologies in scope for domestic manufacturing conversion grants. So do any of you on the line actually currently drive any of the following vehicle types? So hybrid electric, by hybrid electric, we mean a hybrid vehicle that does not plug into the wall. Plug-in hybrid electric, also called a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. This is a vehicle you can plug into the wall, but still has an internal combustion engine vehicle, allows you to travel on one or both, depending on the control strategy. A plug-in electric vehicle, also called a battery electric vehicle. This is what we think of as a vehicle that plugs into the wall, does not have an internal combustion engine vehicle, or a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. So any of you driving a vehicle that is fueled by hydrogen. Looks like a few of you drive some form of these vehicles. Others of you do not. Interesting. All right. Any other EV enthusiasts out there? I'll give you another few seconds to respond to the poll, but good responses coming in so far. I think this is a great opportunity for us to get to know you and hopefully for you to get to know the technologies today, especially those of you who maybe haven't converted to the technology yourselves yet. Okay, one more icebreaker question. Which type of vehicle should be a priority for manufacturing conversion? So the legislating language mentions all of these by name as in scope for the domestic manufacturing conversion grants. So again, please let us know from your perspective which type of vehicle should be a priority for these grants. So hybrid electric vehicle, again, these are vehicles that have a hybrid powertrain but do not plug into the wall. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, these are vehicles that can plug into the wall and have both battery power and internal combustion engine power, some combination of the two over a vehicle's drive cycle. Plug-in electric vehicle, these are battery electric vehicles, so run entirely by battery charged from plugging into the wall. And hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, exactly what it sounds like, an electric drivetrain fueled by hydrogen coming from a hydrogen storage source. So it looks like interesting distribution here. Some, I guess, more votes for plug-in electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, for hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, and votes also, fewer votes, but votes also for hybrid electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. I'll pause a little bit here. This is going to be our last icebreaker question, so I'll give you a few more seconds to get your vote in. These results are really valuable for us. Today's workshop is meant to complement the RFI that's currently open. This is a great way to share your perspective in the aggregate with some of your peers that have joined us on the call today. Not meant to replace the answers we hope to get from you through the RFI formally as a function of your submissions there, but still useful for us. So thanks to all of you who have voted here. This is instructive for us at DOE. So great. Thanks to everyone who participated in the icebreaker polls. We will have other polls coming up specific to other parts of this grant program later in today's agenda. But first, as I promised earlier, we're going to jump back to Stephen Boyd to give us some information about the request for information on domestic manufacturing conversion grants for electrified vehicles. As Dave Howell mentioned earlier, Stephen Boyd is our acting deputy director for batteries and critical materials in the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains. So with that, Stephen, back over to you.
Okay, I know my slides are up next here. I'm just going to wait till we get there. Okay. So I'm going to start just with a pretty quick overview of the Inflation Reduction Act, Section 50143, which provides grants for the domestic production of hybrid, plug-in electric hybrid, plug-in electric drive, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. There's more details in the RFI, which I would encourage folks to look there, as well as if you'd like, you can pull up the actual section from the Inflation Reduction Act. But you see here, this is a $2 billion available for cooperative agreements with a minimum cost share of 50%. This is generally intended for those involved in converting domestic manufacturing capabilities to support the production of electrified vehicles across the supply chain. And so, as we identified those sort of 4 vehicle types that are in play here, I'll also note at the bottom there's a few of the officers represented that we've been working with so far and we'll continue to work with as we build out this program. Let's go to the next slide. Just a little bit of background on the program and some of the complementary work that's being done here. The transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, accounting for 27% of all emissions in 2020. Transportation is also a major source of smog-forming nitrogen oxides and particulate matter, which can trigger asthma attacks and other health problems for the most vulnerable among us. Additionally, President Biden has set an ambitious goal that at least 50% of all new passenger cars and light trucks sold in 2030 be zero-emission vehicles, including battery electric, plug-in electric, or fuel cell vehicles. The Inflation Reduction Act tackles these priorities comprehensively by combining incentives for consumers and businesses to purchase clean vehicles with programs to expand manufacturing and sourcing of vehicle components and critical materials in the United States. More information and background can be found on both the bipartisan infrastructure law as well as the Inflation Reduction Act by following the guidebook links that are contained in the RFI. And additionally, you may be interested in the document that's pictured there. That's the National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization. It's a pretty big and comprehensive document, exciting for some of us involved in the field here at DOE. We also support these efforts across many offices, which I've mentioned, and we're thankful for their help so far in the development of this RFI. Links to those organizations that are listed there are also included in the RFI document for your reference. Let's go to the next slide here, and we're going to jump into a little bit of what we're getting to today. Which is the purpose of this RFI, like many others that DOE have released, is to elicit feedback from both the folks we have here today on the line, as well as anyone else who cares to voice their opinions and thoughts to us. This is solely a request for information. This is not a funding opportunity, and we're not accepting applications for funding at this time. And in terms of responding to the RFI, folks are welcome to answer as few or as many of the questions as you like, but we do ask people to please label your responses by the question number and section to which you're responding, so that we can make sure we're putting the right responses to the right questions. So with that said, what I'm going to do is spend a few minutes walking through each of the questions in the RFI. I'm going to do my best not to just recite the questions to you, but more to explain a little bit about why we're asking these questions, and we're hopeful that might give folks a little bit more insight into either what we're thinking or how they could approach answering those questions in a succinct or effective manner. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to start to step through these, starting with question 1, which is that we'd like to know more about the different facilities and capabilities that could be used to support manufacturing and the supply for vehicle electrification. As simple as that. The second question here, in defining a facility that has recently ceased operation or will cease operation in the near future. Since these types of facilities are specifically mentioned as part of this program, we'd like to hear how folks might categorize these so that we have a better understanding on our side of what that could look like. On question 3, on DOE streamlining applications, we do understand, and we've gotten feedback, that these requirements, including RFI and FOA responses, take time and effort to address. And so learning more on our side may help us to make things easier. And so we're happy to get feedback on that question. For number 4, in terms of particular vehicle types or components, supporting vehicle electrification can take many different shapes and sizes, and we fully recognize that. So better or completely filling out our understanding of the entire picture really could be helpful to meet needs across the board in terms of different vehicle types, component specifications, that sort of thing. And the last question here, previous manufacturing experience, this could also help us identify existing capabilities and workforce skills that can support manufacturing across the supply chain, and including different types of manufacturing and different vehicles. So looking for any responses you'd have to that one. Let's go to the next slide. And so just at the top there, want to make it perfectly clear that overall, we're couching these questions as if it's for a single existing facility. We do understand that respondents like yourselves may have additional locations or multiple locations even that do the same sort of thing. And so we're happy to get responses for multiple facilities. We just ask that you try to clarify that in your answers. So for number 6 there, we're asking the question what you might envision for a conversion of a facility at a high level, and broadly, what does the market that facility serve look like? On question 7, for current and anticipated production volumes, this is just a more specific market questions to help us understand the size and space of what could be envisioned in one of these projects. And for question 8, we're trying to get a sense for the costs of retooling and providing reasonable justification for the types of projects that could be envisioned as part of this program. And so this question might give us some more data to inform that. Next slide. For question 9, again, this gets to the extrinsic value of a refurbished facility and program design objectives in supporting the overall manufacturing and supply chain for electric vehicles. Question 10, these are important considerations for manufacturing and otherwise could otherwise affect linked parts of the supply chain, or that sort of vertical alignment in some areas could be helpful. For question 11, obstacles that you may anticipate. We certainly understand that many barriers can potentially exist, and many of those could be significant, but would be anticipated as part of facility repurposing. And we again understand that represents a significant investment. And finally here, question 12. This is really two questions, but linked in that there are both local benefits and local needs for many of these facilities. And so we just want to ask for more background on that. Okay, next slide. Question 13, we want to hear individual justifications for making these specific decisions to convert manufacturing and cast them in the light of supporting certain vehicle types. There are some prompts here, but certainly you don't have to follow those, and you could expand beyond just those categories we're suggesting. So another categorization or another different vehicle specification or sub specification or something like that is totally fine here. On question 14, why is this a priority? We expect that the transition to electrified vehicles will take more than a single manufacturing conversion program such as this. So our understanding of priorities across the board from respondents is going to be, I think, really enlightening in terms of giving us again a better scope and a better picture of what's out there and what folks are suggesting. And then question 15 here, overall market size. This is really a holistic ask for that sort of high-level market characterization and other impacts that could be part of this sort of project, including domestic market, how things fit in, and what else might be important for you as part of this project. Okay, next slide. And this is my last group here. We're asking on question 16 here, asking in a slightly different way, what other impacts might this project have for supply chains and the industry in a broader view? Again, we get there's probably a lot of things that can be impacted by this sort of conversion projects, and so we're just trying to cast a wide net and prompt folks to give us maybe some other backgrounds or other impacts that could be important for us. On question 17, raw materials and input. Again, broadly, we're understanding that supply chains could drive our approach here, supporting supply chains. This is either existing links or capabilities that may be important, or alternatively, filling needed gaps or roles in supply chains is what we're asking for here. Question 18, potential risks. Our understanding of risks in this area will inform decisions, and addressing informed risk in a strategic manner may provide strong justification for decisions or program design here. And then last question 19, certainly we hope these questions are helpful in gathering information, but we understand the list of questions here will not cover every possible issue or need from folks responding. So I just ask that you please use this question as our prompt to ask you for anything else that you think we could use in terms of this program. And so we'll go to the next slide here. And we'd like to ask just a few more polling questions from everyone. So get your devices ready.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephen, for that overview of the first section of the RFI as we transition from Stephen's presentation, as Stephen said, over to another round of Menti polling. So we have several polls together this time aligned with the types of questions that Stephen just walked us through. To be clear, these polls do not supplant or replace the request for information and your opportunity to formally submit answers to those questions via the RFI process. So this is a fun way to keep this RFI workshop engaging and interactive, give us a bit of a preview in the aggregate of the responses that you will submit. But again, want to underscore your responding to the RFI really is the most important way to convey your information to us. That said, this first polling question asks about your experience in manufacturing supporting the domestic automotive industry and experience with light vehicles, with medium vehicles, with heavy duty vehicles. It looks like based on the responses so far, we have a fairly equal distribution across all three of those. I see answers are still rolling in. So those of you who maybe put your phone down, please pick that back up, scan the QR code again. Let us know your thoughts in response to this first polling question. Any of you who don't have a smartphone nearby, good for you for staying focused at the workplace. Go ahead and jump to menti.com on your laptop or desktop system and enter the code shown there. And you can reply to the poll via a laptop or desktop system. So it looks like, again, good distribution across light, medium, and heavy vehicles based on who's joined us today. All right, going to our next polling question. Up next, we'd like to know about your experience and thinking on the location of manufacturing. So is the product that you would propose to manufacture instead currently manufactured domestically, abroad, or both? So helping us understand the current status quo, what is manufactured domestically versus abroad, compared to a product that could be manufactured with support from this particular grant program. So we see answers rolling in. Looks like heavy responses towards the both categories. Some domestically, none abroad only. Interesting to see. All right, keep those answers rolling in. I know compared to the number of folks we have on the line, there are still other responses we haven't heard from yet. I know given the scope of today's attendees, it's possible that not everyone is active in manufacturing, but could be a stakeholder associated with manufacturing. We would love to hear your perspective too. Again, this one asking about what you would propose to manufacture. Is it currently manufactured domestically, abroad, or both? Looks like close to 85% are saying what current manufacturing involves both. All right, up next, what are signs companies, unions, and/or communities can use to identify facilities that will cease operations in the future? So a heads up here, the last few questions, all of the questions up until now have been a multiple choice. So you had the opportunity of choosing via the Menti app one of several pre-populated choices. Thanks to those of you who have been doing so far. This question, I won't say more complicated, but a little more open-ended response. You do have the opportunity in the Menti app to propose an answer to this open-ended question in 5 words or less. So we see one example shown there. Again, to this first open-ended question, what are signs that companies, unions, and/or communities can use to identify facilities that will cease operations in the future? We see a couple of responses rolling in at this point. So this idea of product mix, I think my thinking there is probably, is that changing? Is it inconsistent maybe with what is demanded in the market? That would be a way to make a comparison between product mix and whether that facility would stay operational. The second response we see is reduced employment. That does make sense. Reading the writing on the wall there, as the labor required goes down, that may be a signal that trend may continue. Reduced revenues, customer needs, absolutely. We want that supply to be met by demand in terms of a healthy economic balance there. Layoffs closely tied to that answer of reduced employment. So I think 2 variations on the same theme there. Competitiveness, a good word to summarize a lot of the product we've seen here, actually. And then charging station availability. So interesting thought there, maybe specific to the facility, or more general comment on the transition from maybe conventional transportation hardware to next generation low carbon transportation hardware. Declining facility ratings, interesting to hear. So maybe measures of competitiveness, reduced employment, but other ratings of that facility, and how effective it is in achieving its mission. Capacity utilization, certainly, actually the products coming off as a parallel to some of the labor issues already raised. Decrease in home ownership, that's a great point. Underscoring that there are community indicators that may be affected by what's happening at the facility, even though not directly indicative of what's happening at the facility itself. That's a great point. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll have a future speaker that actually talks to that topic about the connection between the facility and community connections. I think up next we have another open-ended question. Thanks to all of you for the great thinking and the great responses there. So again, the approach is the same here. So no multiple choice, given that this really is an open-ended type question. But where do you currently obtain supplies for existing manufacturing? So helping us understand the supply chain and considerations for the facility. You know, are there needs from additional facilities in the US? Are there needs for those facilities, given where they lie in the supply chain, you know, further upstream, further downstream, and what might that mean for that flow of goods and labor potentially across the supply chain specific to, in this case, domestic manufacturing conversion. Yeah, we see answers starting to roll in here. Thanks to those of you for the good perspective and the good thinking, taking the time to convey this concisely. I know sometimes that's hard to do in just 5 words or less, but already some great perspective flowing in. So the global supply chain, great comment there, especially recognizing the global element of that, maybe in contrast to the domestic scope of the domestic manufacturing conversion grants. Some local global partners, so back to an earlier theme of where are products going, where are products being manufactured, some domestically, some internationally. Here we see some of the supply chain coming locally, globally. Domestic producers, nice counterbalance to that global supply chain with you know, some of both there in between. Key IP overseas, regarding the rest of the bill of materials, local as much as possible. I'm sure that's all the more true given some of the logistics complications we've seen over the past few years. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And then maybe some contrast next to that, overseas because of availability. So an interesting tension, you know, overseas when has to be, but maybe local where possible, reading those two responses together, and then domestic primarily. So some interesting variations on those themes, domestically versus globally, or a balance in between. I'll pause a little bit. We had quite a few more answers to the preceding questions, so I don't want to preclude anyone who is still typing in the response. Additional perspective is very much welcome here. And my thanks again to those of you who've already been able to respond. All right, looks like the number of responses the trickle has slowed, I will say. Since we did hear some comments about communities and the communities in which the facilities are located, actually that's a perfect segue to our next speaker, Virginia Castro. Virginia is the engagement specialist for the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, and she will be talking with us today about worker and community benefits. So with that, Virginia, over to you.
Virginia Castro is an engagement specialist here in the Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains office. And I'll pause for Virginia to come on camera and join us now.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for your participation. It's really great to see our audience actively participating in the polls here. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and discuss the next topic areas, which is the worker and community benefits and our environmental justice priorities, and also underscore the importance of your participation and your partnership. It's really important for us to hear from you directly, and we do encourage respondents to submit responses to this request for information. Great. So in keeping with the administration's goals, as an agency whose mission it is to improve our country's energy prosperity, the department intends to use this provision to support workers, to strengthen communities, and safeguard our environment. Specifically, the project that's provision funds will promote the uptake of clean energy technologies in the private sector, and they'll help to strengthen, diversify, and add vigor to domestic manufacturing and supply chains. We support the creation of quality jobs that pay well enough to sustain a family and offer the free and fair choice to join a union. And it will also advance the deployment of clean energy technologies that reduce emissions and protect the environment in ways that are equitable, sustainable, and meaningful. So respondents to this request for information are encouraged to include information about how this program can best support these goals. Next slide, please. So how is DOE addressing secretarial goals through funding opportunities? Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. As an agency, the Department of Energy is committed to ensuring that environmental justice underlies all of the department's programs, policies, and activities. By providing these funding opportunities, DOE is pursuing the environmental justice goals that the Secretary has set forth. And for that reason, these 4 objectives will be instrumental to project success. And the objectives are prioritizing benefits to disadvantaged communities, giving equitable access to wealth-building opportunities, providing good-paying jobs and career track training, and giving impacted workers and community a voice throughout the process. I think that's a really important pillar to focus on, is that we want to be able to meet communities where they are, make sure that industry and communities are collaborating together so that we can encourage a fair and just and equitable execution of the projects that we have. Next slide, please. So these 4 key principles, when incorporated comprehensively into project proposals, will help ensure the clean energy transition benefits a broad range of Americans. Because of the significance that DOE places on environmental justice, respondents should prioritize our 4 environmental justice goals in their community benefits plans. I do also want to mention that in our current request for information, we have 21 questions dedicated to this section. So it is really important for us to gather input and hear from you about these pillars. First, DOE will consider the extent to which the project illustrates the ability to meet or exceed the objectives of the Justice 40 initiative, which is a goal that the administration created that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments will flow to disadvantaged communities. Later on, I'll explain a little bit more about the Justice 40 initiative. We will also look at the extent to which projects benefit disadvantaged and underserved communities, or also partner with tribal nations that will be outlined within an equity plan also submitted as part of our program. Second, DOE will consider the quality and the manner in which the measures incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the project. This also includes equitable access to wealth building opportunities, teaming, access to good jobs, and contracting opportunities as well. Third, DOE will consider the quality and manner in which the proposed project will create and retain high quality, good paying jobs with a free and fair choice to join or to form a union. DOE will also consider the extent to which project provides workforce opportunities in low and moderate income communities or in communities that have lost jobs due to fossil energy displacement. Fourth, the community and workers, it's really important that the community workers have a real voice in project execution and the outcomes, and it's important to have accountability in the outcomes. For example, through having a negotiated workforce and community agreements, and making sure that we're engaging with communities and workforce in a meaningful way. This can help ensure that stakeholders and groups that are traditionally excluded are given sufficient representation, as well as aid in the negotiation of workforce and community agreements, which can include community benefits agreements, good neighbor agreements, project labor agreements, or similarly negotiated and enforceable agreements. The applicant's community benefits plan should describe plans and actions for engaging and partnering with labor and stakeholder groups within the community themselves. And this can include, but is definitely not limited to, workforce development organizations and community colleges, labor unions or trades, social service providers, state, regional, and local governments, and community-based organizations representing local residences, businesses, with a particular attention on engaging those serving underserved and disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. These 4 goals, Justice 40, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, good jobs, workforce and community agreements, often intersect. For example, an apprenticeship program that prepares workers for clean energy jobs may involve the faculty and students at a minority servant institution, and collaborations with community members may inform the program's recruitment efforts. These goals need not be siloed into 4 isolated topics. Instead, they may overlap, influence, and reinforce one another. Next slide, please. So what's included? So for every budget period that the community for the community benefits plan, there must be at least one milestone that is SMART, that is a specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-based milestone. SMART milestones make it possible to measure the project's progress against the actions that the applicants have proposed. And during the technical review process, the community benefits plan will be evaluated. Typically, it accounts for about 20% of the project's overall score. If DOE selects the project, the department will incorporate the community benefits plan into the award and require the funding recipient to implement community benefits plans proposed in his application. And during the life of the award, DOE will evaluate the recipient's progress towards its SMART milestone, and including as part of the go, no-go review process. That is the period in which DOE will determine whether to continue project funding. So that was a lot of information. We can take a short break right now, and we'd like to hear from you. So I'm going to turn it back to my colleague, Steve, for another poll.
Great. Thanks so much, Virginia.
Thanks, Virginia. I'm going to jump in instead of Stephen this time, but thank you for the great information on community benefits. Obviously, an important consideration as we think about these domestic manufacturing facilities, the impact they have on communities and how the communities can support them. So really appreciate the perspective you shared. We're going to jump back to our polls, this time with a look towards some of the material that Virginia just shared with us. So thinking about workers, thinking about communities, and thinking about the relationship with these manufacturing facilities. So the first question asks, what existing workforce education and training efforts are preparing workers for this industry? This is a bit of a different approach compared to the previous 2 we've seen. So multiple choice in a way, but rather than selecting one answer, the Menti platform will invite you to rank them. So your choices are technical school programs, community college, registered apprenticeship programs, and labor management training programs. Looks like we have votes coming in. We're seeing the rank order kind of falling into place at this point. Looks like quite a few votes for technical school programs in first place across the board, followed by a closer score between community college and registered apprenticeship programs. Looks like that's getting closer as more responses come in, followed lastly by labor management training programs. Very interesting. I'd encourage folks, I know it takes some time to do the drop-down menus and to organize your choices rather than just choosing multiple choice, but this is very valuable for us to understand from those of you gathered on the line today, which ones of these could be most effective in helping make sure we have the educated, skilled workforce to perform the good needed jobs at these facilities. Again, looks like technical school programs, community college, registered apprenticeship are coming in 1, 2, 3 in that order. Great. Thank you all for your perspectives. Okay, up next, we have another open-ended question. So you know how this works at this point. Please type in 5 words or less. This time, a response to the prompt, what is one way DOE could streamline the applications process to align with other similar programs? So for those of you who would potentially respond to a future potential funding opportunity announcement, please think about minimizing this burden for you and us. How can we streamline this to make this process as efficient and effective as possible for all of us potentially involved? So think about similar programs you've been involved in before. Those of you who indicated at the beginning of our Mentee polling earlier in the hour together that you have worked with parts of DOE in the past, be it the Vehicle Technologies Office, the Loan Programs Office, the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technologies Office. What went well in those programs? What could work better? And thinking specifically about the applications process, what might you recommend to us as we start to think about structuring that to streamline it, to make it as easy on all of you as potential respondents as possible? So I'm not seeing any responses to this one in particular. I'll pause a little longer just to make sure folks have time. I do know it can be difficult to provide an answer in less than 5 words. I see some answers starting to flow in. I don't know off the top of my head. I do think the Mentee platform might allow you to reply more than once. So if you want to reply, click send in 5 words and hit back and try to submit again. You're welcome to try to do that. Yeah, great perspectives coming in here. So clarifying differences between similar programs. Great suggestion. We are working on web interfaces that will allow you to understand the complementarity of various DOE programs, given the number of programs supported by Bill and IRA. One definition for Justice 40. We hear you. Thank you for that perspective. More earlier feedback. I think the current process is good, comprehensive enough, great. Thank you for that. Detailed guidelines and legal process. All right, a variety of considerations here, some constructively critical, several notes on feedback, and others. Thank you, especially for the positive remark about the current process. And streamlining is potentially risky. Yeah, great point. And so there are certainly reasons we are using the process currently in place. I think any changes would be well thought out before implemented. Transparency, great. Thank you all for the great perspective there. Up next, we have another open-ended question. This time, we'll pivot from thinking about the application itself and instead respond to the prompt. Besides automotive, what other former manufacturing facilities could be used for domestic EV manufacturing? So I think the ready thinking is, all right, these are domestic manufacturing conversion grants for electrified vehicles. You know, perhaps these are pre-existing automotive facilities that will be retooled, refurbished, or reconfigured into electrified vehicle manufacturing. Remember, electrified vehicle does include hybrid, plug-in hybrid, battery electric, and hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicles. So all of those are in scope here. But thinking broadly, thinking creatively, are there other types of facilities potentially in scope that we should be aware of? So we write any guidance broadly enough to ensure those are in scope. So what other types of facilities could be retooled, reconfigured, or refurbished in a way that would allow them to function effectively for the domestic production of electrified vehicles components, and supplies for those vehicles. So we see some good responses coming in already. This is another open-ended response, so you can share up to 5 words. The response here, kind of cool, is shown in a word map. And so we see several words already appearing on the screen. I'll mention those of you who are following along, if any of these resonate with you as, yes, that makes a lot of sense, go ahead and put that in yourself too. that will cause those words to become larger, to become bolder in a way that gives us a notional understanding that construction, for example, several folks have now voted for construction as a facility we should think of. If there's others of these, heavy trucks, heavy equipment, heavy trucks arguably already in the automotive space, but agriculture, maybe on the fence, right? Automotive in a way, not maybe the typical highway transportation facility we think of. A good suggestion there. Warehouse space, supplier, logistics, recycling, metal scrap, all great suggestions. I'll pause a little more. Anyone who hasn't responded yet, if you'd like to offer emphasis for any of these, please go ahead and add the same word in your response. I see the number of active folks in the Menti changing, so any of you who may have dropped off, please go ahead and grab your smartphone again, scan that QR code, or open your laptop, go to menti.com and enter the code there. That will put you right back on track. It will bring you to the slide we're currently editing and give you the chance to provide any input there. Looks like lots of votes for construction here. Great. Thank you all very much. Let's go to one more open-ended question before we jump back to Virginia, and one more set of slides before we conclude for the day. So this is another open-ended question. Again, the challenge of communicating in 5 words or less, but we appreciate the effort. We will certainly take your perspectives and feedback into account. This time in response to the prompt, what unions or other labor groups do you recommend that DOE engage with in implementation of the Domestic Manufacturing Conversion Grant Program? So thinking about domestic manufacturing conversion grants and potential stakeholders from kind of the labor sector, who do we need to make sure we have engaged such that labor perspective is appropriately accounted for and we're aware of as we think about the guidance for this particular provision. Again, this is open-ended. And the results will be shown as a word map. So like before, anything you see appear on the screen that resonates with you, you'd like to give a thumbs up or a +1 to, go ahead and submit that from your own Menti interface. That will help increase the font size, put that in bold to help us understand, hey, this really rises to the top as a perspective you want included. Again, as before, if you happen to have fallen off the Menti platform, please grab that smartphone, scan that QR code again, or open your laptop, go to menti.com and enter the code there. The platform is great at bringing you right back to where we are in real time, so it will launch you right back to this page and allow you to provide your thinking on which unions or labor groups DOE needs to be mindful of as the Domestic Manufacturing Conversion Grant Program is moving forward. So looks like several good responses here. OCD grant recipients, aerospace, trade schools, technical schools. Looks like several votes for AFL-CIO and for manufacturers, and I think the largest number of votes so far coming in for UAW. Great thinking. I see some new acronyms popping up now. So IBEW, NDIA, great. IUE, colleges or universities, great. Apex, former PTAX, fantastic. I'll pause one more time. Any final thoughts here? Last chance to provide your response to this question or vote for something that's already here. Again, putting in the same thing will increase the font size or grow that. And again, I want to underscore each time we do these polls, your responses here do not supplant your responses to the RFI. So your input here is valuable, but please make sure to provide similar feedback, even more detailed feedback to the RFI itself. To make sure you have the opportunity for more detailed feedback and we have the opportunity to receive and digest your valuable perspective. Great, thank you all again. So with that, we're going to pivot back to Virginia, who has a few additional slides for us, this time on energy and environmental justice priorities and the Justice 40 initiative. So with that, Virginia, back over to you.
Great. Thank you for your active participation. So I'm going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into Justice 40. to cover and more sections too about that, as well as the worker benefits. So for the first time in the nation's history, the federal government has made it a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. President Biden made this historic commitment when he signed Executive Order 14008 within days of taking office. And these benefits include climate change, investment in clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, as well as development of clean water infrastructure. And in our request for information, we have 21 questions on these topics, and we definitely would appreciate your input because we want to hear from you on how we can make sure that we are fully represented in designing this program. Next slide, please. So as part of the community benefits plans, applicants are required to submit a Justice 40 plan. And the Justice 40 Initiative Plan should provide an overview of the benefits that can be supported by measurable metrics. And this Justice 40 Initiative Plan section includes identification of applicable disadvantaged communities to which the anticipated project benefits will flow, identifying applicable benefits that are quantifiable, measurable, and trackable at a minimum, and a discussion of the relevance of each of the 8 Justice 40 initiatives. And 3, a description of how and when the anticipated benefits are expected to flow to disadvantaged communities. So these mean things like when the benefits will flow during either during the project development or after the project has been completed, how applicants are looking to track the benefits and when they're delivered, things like that. The 4th one is a discussion of anticipated negative and cumulative environmental impacts. And these are anticipated negative or positive environmental impacts associated with the project. Any discussion or ideas about how applicants plan to mitigate any negative impacts? And within the context of cumulative impacts, applicants can visit a resource by our colleagues at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EJ Screen tool, to quantitatively explore environmental impacts in proposed project areas. So this section of the plan, of the Community Benefits Plan, will be incorporated into the award and memorialized in a legally enforceable Community Benefits Agreement or similar documents if selected, and shall include appropriate milestones for benefits delivery. Next slide, please. This map was taken from the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. We'll provide these resources in the slide links at the end of this presentation. Applicants can look at can visit geoplatforms.gov. This map highlights census tracts that are considered disadvantaged communities because they are overburdened and underserved. And it also designates federally recognized tribes, including Alaska Native villages, and as disadvantaged communities and highlights them as such. But what is a disadvantaged community? So a community can be either people in a geographic proximity or experiencing a common condition. And the disadvantaged part was measured and based on a score across 36 indicators such as energy burden, housing burden, power outages, cancer incidences, and more. And the higher the score, the more the disadvantage. On this map, disadvantaged communities are shown in blue and green, with all the territories and tribal lands in green. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the 8 Justice 40 policy priorities. And so some questions for applicants or potential projects to think about are, what are the anticipated environmental impacts of the project and how will we mitigate these impacts? describing in detail how targeted communities will receive these benefits. And the only way to know that is by actually speaking with the communities themselves and the community leaders and meeting them where they are in order to get that information so that you are partnered and informed with the right information to know that what you're proposing actually meets the needs. And then another question to think about or example is like, how does this project increase access to clean energy and decrease harmful emissions? And providing methods for tracking the progress of these outcomes. Those are just some examples. Next slide, please. So Executive Order 13985 is advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. And Executive Order 11246 requires that all federally assisted contractors make good faith efforts to meet the goals that about 7% of construction project hours be performed by women and a certain percentage of construction work hours varying based on geography be performed by people of color. And in keeping with the President's executive orders, applicants for DOE funding must submit a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility plan describing how DEIA objectives will be incorporated into the project. This is part of a whole of government approach to advancing equity. And in our funding opportunities and through our programs, we're seeking to encourage this participation of underserved communities and underrepresented groups to ensure equitable access to business opportunities, to good paying jobs, to career track training, and other economic opportunities. And so that's why the partnerships with your community-based organizations and underrepresented businesses, institutions, and training organizations are really critical. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of what could be included in a diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility plan, and that is, a commitment to partner with minority business enterprise. Also, to fill positions for DOE-funded projects, partner with workforce training organizations serving underrepresented communities and those facing systemic barriers to quality employment, such as those with disability, returning citizens, and working with veterans and youth. We encourage the inclusion of letters of support from historically excluded geographies, racial minorities, and women as part of this proposal. Next slide, please. So DOE jobs priorities. Access to economic opportunity creates a virtuous cycle. Secretary Granholm put it well when she said, "I'm confident that as the American people see and feel the benefits of our efforts to transform America's economy, lower costs, create jobs, and strengthen our national security, we will build momentum and broaden support for further action. By investing in infrastructure and domestic supply chains, and by adapting and enforcing domestic content, manufacturing, and assembly requirements, we will grow American jobs. By supporting our responsible employers, adopting and ensuring accountability with strong labor standards, and encouraging collective bargaining, we can improve the quality of our energy jobs. And lastly, by focusing on workforce development, efforts on removing barriers to career track training, quality jobs, and career advancement, we can facilitate the diversity, inclusion, and equitable access." Next slide, please. In Executive Order 14025 on worker organizing and empowerment, which the Biden administration issued in April 26 of 21, affirms that the option to freely and fairly join a union is a critical one. The order states, confirming the policies declared in federal labor laws, substantial evidence shows that union membership increases wages, the likelihood of receiving employer-provided benefits, and job security. Union membership also gives workers the means to build the power to ensure their voices are heard in their workplaces, their communities, and in the nation. Next slide, please. DOE funding applicants must provide a framework for the creation and retention of good paying jobs. We're looking also to see that these applications ensure they're devoid of hostility and workplace harassment, and that workers are properly classified as employees and have a free and fair choice to join, form, or assist a union. And funding applicants should detail their commitments to paying above average wages, to ensure workers also have the ability to invest in training to support skilled workforce, and ensure that workers' voices and health and safety are in the design and implementation. Next slide, please. So for more information, applicants can use, and respondents to this request for information, can use these links to learn more about environmental justice, community and worker benefits, as well as diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. Now that we have a comprehensive overview of worker and community benefits and Justice 40 initiatives, we would like to invite you to review the 21 questions that are in our request for information, and your feedback is critical and will be used by our program and by the department for future planning and developing of future opportunities. And so we really strongly encourage and value your participation. So now it's time for our last set of polling. Again, I thank you for your time and for your partnership, and I'll turn it back to my colleague, Steve.
Thank you, Virginia.
So much, Virginia.
I'm going to jump in on behalf of
Appreciate
Stephen
your presentation
this time
and walking us through all.
And invite everybody to shift once more over to the Menti platform. Really great perspective on the Justice 40 initiative, hopefully useful context for all of you who are thinking about responding to the RFI and thinking about this particular provision more broadly as we move through the RFI to program planning beyond. So thanks again to Virginia. And with that, we will shift to a round of polling questions that tie back to environmental energy justice and the Justice 40 initiative that Virginia just walked us through. So up first, we have another open-ended question. So what is the biggest environmental concern for domestic EV manufacturing? So lots to potentially consider here. This is another 5 words or less answer. We certainly could have come up with a short list for you to select from, but didn't want to anchor you to some of the things that we were thinking about ourselves within the Department of Energy. I think the RFI process is particularly valuable because it gives us outside perspective. And so you sharing your original thinking with us rather than maybe us leading your responses, I think will be particularly valuable here. So as you're thinking about domestic electrified vehicle manufacturing, again, everything in scope includes hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, all potentially in scope here. So the facilities to assemble those vehicles, to manufacture the materials and components that are supplied to those vehicles, all potentially in scope here. As you think about those facilities and the communities in which they're located, what are the biggest environmental concerns that come to mind? As you can see, we are getting results in a word map again. So this is a case where lots of good thinking already shown on the slide, and any aspects that we hear from more than one participant will be emphasized in larger font, bolder font. And so we can see front and center there. The largest font is battery recycling at present. Lots of other considerations here on the slide. So from the grid, other variations on recycling. So raw materials, several different variations on that shown at the top of the slide. Water usage, emissions, raw materials generally. And so actually raw materials might rise to the level of battery recycling if we were to take that, the other phrasing that we see at the top of the word map into account there too. Unintended consequences, environmental, chemistry treatment, private investment, lots of good thinking here. And it looks like lots of votes still coming in. So thanks to all of you who are sharing your perspective here. I'll pause one more time. Any last thoughts, or as we've done before, any of these themes that resonate with you, please feel free to go ahead and input that from your own Menti interface to make sure that that rises to the, I'll say the top, but appears in the largest font here as one of the major takeaways. Looks like the number of responses has slowed. So again, battery recycling and refining raw materials look like the big concerns there. Thank you all again for the perspective. So up next, we have another prompt. What obstacles do you anticipate for facility conversion? As an example, permitting or technical assistance or workforce, not limited to those things. So please think creatively beyond those things, though if any of those do resonate with you as potential concerns, please let us know. This is another case where we'd like to hear from you in 5 words or less. So take time to organize your thoughts and communicate those via the Menti platform. As a reminder, any of you who may have gotten kicked off the Menti platform, please break back out that smartphone device and scan the QR code, or go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the screen. That will bring you to the current prompt in real time and allow you to provide your responses there. I see responses already coming in, so thanks everyone for the good quick thinking here. So obstacles for facility conversion, workforce skills, costs, technology implementation, funding, capital investment, demand, site preparation, infrastructure, high lease costs, capital investment, impact on local traffic and utilities. Big diversity of responses here, lots of good thinking and potentially lots of challenges here. These are good for us to be aware of, good for us to keep in mind as we think about mobilizing the funds available here to help with the conversion of these manufacturing facilities. Some additional thinking there at the bottom: permits and cost, workforce development. Great, thank you all. Some quick reactions there. So obstacles that we'll all look forward to overcoming together as this program moves forward. All right, up next we have one, I think, final opportunity for polling. So a last chance for all of you to provide your perspective to us via the Menti platform. Again, as I've said many times previously, and I'll say again here, we very much appreciate your engagement and participation and perspective in response to these prompts. But please don't let that supplant or replace what would be your formal response to the RFI. That is the formal way to get your responses to us. Require DOE consideration of what you provide in terms of perspective and thinking in response to that RFI as we think about this, this financial assistance program going forward. So thank you all again for both your reactions today and to the RFI going forward. So with that in mind, one last opportunity for polling question for all of you, again, in 5 words or less. So what amount of funding would enable retooling an existing manufacturing facility for domestic electrified vehicle manufacturing? I'll clarify here, we're not looking for a specific response from you in terms of the size of the facility you're thinking of, but give us an order of magnitude about, given the size of the facility that you're thinking about, and keeping in mind that these domestic EV manufacturing conversion grants can cover 50%, up to 50% of that, 50% or more cost share is required. Is it $1 million? Is it $10 million? Is it $100 million? Is it more than that? To help us understand an order of magnitude of, what is the right size investment to think about DOE helping be effective as folks are thinking about these facilities. Yeah, so some great thinking already coming in here. So $20 million, $5 to $50 million, fairly consistent with that first $20 million response, $10 million in the same range. This idea of partial conversions, great perspective there. So rather than a complete conversion and a transitional conversion, maybe if I could paraphrase there, what I see in the parenthetical, ramping up new as existing ramps down. Interesting thinking there. Depends on level of automation. 10 million for less than 500 vehicles a year if no automation. 10 to 50 million, again, roughly aligned with that 5 to 50 million there at the top. And then program falls short of total need. Would be interesting to hear what the total need expected or needed there would be thought of. And remember, this is facility by facility, so this is not total program. That's what we're asking for there. I think by no means are we hoping that this program alone is going to convert the entire industry, but we certainly hope it will help. So facility by facility, help us understand, what the right order of magnitude is to be thinking of here. And it looks like there is, I won't say consensus, but at least a distribution that we can start to make sense of here. Excellent. All right, well, great. Thank you all again for your perspective, for your engagement, and for letting us know in the aggregate across all of you who are participating today, your thinking in response to the various polling questions that we have had over the past hour and a half. At this point, we're going to shift away from the Minty platform into one final concluding slide. I want to thank all of our speakers, our presenters again. So thanks to Dave Howell, thanks to Stephen Boyd, thanks to Virginia Castro, thanks for the very valuable comments about the new Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, about the overview of this particular program, of the specifics of the RFI, so the types of questions about the program itself, about community benefits, community considerations, and about Justice 40. And then I really want to emphasize, again, a thanks to all of you. But then again, as I've mentioned several times, a strong encouragement to actually respond to the RFI. We very much appreciate your time and attention over the past 90 minutes. The real value comes in your response to the RFI that will help the department think about this program going forward, leading up to any potential funding opportunity. So you can use the QR code there. That will take you directly to the RFI, so it makes it easy to get to the RFI for you to respond. We also have a link in the slides. Once those are made public, there are some accessibility considerations we need to make to the slides before they're available, but stay tuned. We do anticipate they may be made available in the coming weeks. I do also want to emphasize that the deadline for RFI responses is rapidly approaching. That's coming up June 9th, so that's the middle of next week. This did open several weeks ago, so hopefully many of you have been thinking about this for a while at this point. But we are at this point in the home stretch and would appreciate your thinking going into that June 9th, June 9th, not May 9th deadline. Yes, May 9th, not June 9th deadline. I got a little confused there. So next Wednesday is the right one. I faked you out when I said June. That's my fault. It may or may not be close to my birthday, which may be why I said it. Didn't mean to throw you off guard, but May 9th, next Wednesday, is the deadline. So please get that in by May 9th. We are at a timetable to close the RFI out, take your responses into consideration to shape this program going forward. So your efficiency and efficacy in responding by that deadline are much appreciated. I do also want to mention that we have links to join the newsletter to get future updates from the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains. That link is available here. And again, the slides will be provided in PDF form following the conclusion of all workshops. We'll do that as soon as possible once we address some accessibility issues. Make sure these links are active so that you can respond to the RFI, join the newsletter, and click on the various links you saw earlier in the deck about community benefits, Justice 40, and other aspects of the department that could affect this particular program. So I think with that, I will thank you all again for your participation in today's workshop. Thank you for your engagement, the responses you already provided via the polls. Thanks to some of you for already having submitted your RFI, and thanks to those of you who haven't yet but plan to do so by that May 9th deadline. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support of programs like these, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you for the good work you do. Thank you all again. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, and take care.